But it doesn't matter if you were a player or not I mean, listen, JJ Watt has probably, I don't know, for me, he's number one or number two greatest all-time defensive, front four players I've ever seen. Him and Aaron Donald. Obviously, I was with Reggie, top three at the very, very worst. Okay. But his point, I think, is not that he couldn't learn this. It's that as it stands right now, and again, I'm projecting a little bit, but as it stands right now, nobody has given him a clear, and this was back in December, a clear idea of what this is. Okay. So this is the Mark Andrews play, and this isn't the beginning of it, but this is what happened. Okay. So Mark Andrews gets rolled up, and you see that the linebacker right here has grabbed the hips, swung his feet out from behind, and is landing on the back of his feet. Okay. So right now, if I was to make for through one snapshot, you'd say, and we're going to make a rule because I don't want this to happen because you can see that the weight landing on the back of the legs is the problem. I would say when a defensive player does not try to run through the tackle and instead grabs the hips, swings through the back of the legs, and lands on the back of the legs, that should be a foul, right? And we go through the legalese, but that would be the gist of it. Now, here's where it actually started. Tony Pollard, a couple years ago, takes the arrow or the Texas route and gets rolled up on, and his ankle goes the wrong direction. And I think I got it again here. Yeah. So the way that this works is, and the problem with this is, if the defensive player is coming from behind, let's start it even earlier than that. The reason that we have an issue is because we taught rugby tackling, and rugby tackling doesn't apply as well to football as it does to rugby. Why? Because football players wear helmets. So in rugby tackling, we brought in all these, I call them funny, the guys who live in other countries that are really good at rugby, and they came in and they said, hey, this is how we tackle. It's safer, although, per play, it's not necessarily safer, but they're not wearing helmets. So we kind of went through it. They put their heads behind the hip when they're tackling. They do that because they don't want to take a knee to the side of the head or a thigh to the side of the head and get a concussion. We wear helmets. We don't have that same set of problems, but we taught it that way. And so what ended up happening is over the course of time, smaller players realized against these bigger, stronger running backs with huge legs that if they wrap up at the hip with their shoulder behind or their head behind, like you see here, and they just swing their legs through, it changes the center of gravity of the running back or the ball carrier, and it creates hundreds or thousands of pounds of pressure, depending on the velocity of the tackler, hundreds or thousands of extra pounds of pressure behind the center of gravity of that ball carrier. And then when you add all that to, you land on the back of their legs, something bad is going to happen. So that's what happens here. And you see he hits this, and then it's all bad things. But you'll notice there's a split second where the defensive back here is completely weightless. All of his weight is off the ground and on the backside of Tony Pollard. And that's what ends up ruining him. Could have blown out his front knee. Now, just real simply, let's not get into a physics class, although John Honor would love this. The idea of centrifugal force. As you spin around, if you think about the boy in the center holding the string being kind of the hips of the ball carrier, as you swing around that ball carrier from behind, force is the mass multiplied by that velocity divided by the radius. So essentially, your mass is being multiplied by a square of the velocity of how fast that person's going. So as they swing through, just think about the extra weight. A 200-pound guy who's swinging through at, 10 miles an hour, on a small radius, which is essentially the distance from the chest to, let's say, their hips, you're looking at, 2 feet. You're looking at just a force multiplier of five times. And that can do tremendous. I mean, that just puts a tremendous load on the lower body and the lower limbs of a ball carrier. And then you add to that, they actually end up landing on the backside of that ball carrier's legs. So you see, with kind of mathematically, at least, I hope you get the idea of, maybe my math's off, but you get the idea of how powerful this can be when you consider the tackle. And if you go and look at this play one more time, that's why this kind of stuff happens. Now, I think the easiest way for me to explain it is to watch these guys. I mean, it does work. Now you'll see that they're going in front of a four-legged animal and they're dropping down, grabbing the neck and going in front. But the concept's the same. The only reason that cowboy can take down that steer is because when he swings through, there is so much force, gravitational, rotational force going into the body that it has a real effect on that four-legged strong animal's ability to operate. You see, again, the entire body's off the ground. They swing through, and now you just have so much pressure going down, even with a strong four-legged animal, with all the weight in front of the body, by the way, not behind it. You have the ability to alter the center of gravity. You have the ability to alter the the force that they're putting into the ground, and you can redirect, something in other cases. Hey, I'm not going into that thing and just trying to wrestle that thing down man to man, man to cow. Last thing here, just a quick one for a shout out for the Appleton people. I didn't know there was an Appleton, Minnesota as well. This fellow was from Appleton, Minnesota. You see it again, though. All they're doing is they're taking all that force, they're putting it down on the neck, they're redirecting that center of gravity, and they're able to take down these steers. It's the same concept that we're using here with this tackling. Now, to get back to rugby, this is where things go wrong. We'll see a couple different looks here from the rugby world. And you see the feet come off in front, swing through, and now put all the force. Now, this is on the side of this guy's leg, but this is where initially you saw a lot of pushback from the leagues and trying to make their game safer. They created this hip drop tackle rule that has allowed the NFL to start looking into this hip drop tackle rule. Most people don't know that. This started 3 years ago, maybe in Australia and New Zealand. And so this is a very obvious one. You're getting dragged down. You get all your feet off the air, or off the ground, excuse me. You put the full force into this guy, and all of a sudden, you're swinging back, full force behind him, and now you're going to land on the back of his feet. And that's where things go bad, right? If you just dragged your feet like we used to, either you run through the guy, run through, we talk like the Pete Carroll Seattle Seahawks hawk roll, where you turn a shoulder and roll through it, or you just stop your feet from moving, you drag him down and you're not swinging through. All of those things are A, legal, and B, a lot safer. This is just problematic. And again, this is why they've changed the sport over there to make this illegal. It seems pretty, in other words, when I see this, it seems pretty obvious. Don't do that. I showed you the Mark Andrews play. Don't do that. I showed you the Tony Pollard play. Don't do that. And you see a play just like this. Don't swing your hips around. Don't have your feet off the air. It almost looks like you're swinging from the swing set, or like you're in a cradle position, and you're going to land with your butt, your hamstrings, or something on the back of their legs. Don't do that. The problem really gets down to when you look at the language of this sport, of this rule, it becomes an issue that he gets sent off here. He's upset. I think I'll give you one more look. But the swing through is really where the issue lies. And you can just kind of tell, like, when you see it like that, for me, I don't know. Listen, I know we take away some things from defensive players and we don't like it, and I get that. But for me, this seems like we have the highest level athletes in the world, and we're going to tell them they're not allowed to do that. We're saying you got to find a different way. And no coach in the world until now would be coaching that technique. Like, that's never been coached, because we already try to run through. We got to get our hips going. We try to explode through, use our hips, have our feet chase our hips, right? We're trying to be aggressive. We learned how to hawk roll. Like, we've done other things to fix this problem that don't involve swinging your legs through, having all centrifugal force go into the backside of the center of gravity of this ball carrier, and then land on the back of his legs, potentially trying to break them. So that has never really been a tackling or a performance thing. Here's the issue. Article 18, hip drop tackle. It is a foul if the player uses the following technique to bring a runner to the ground. A, grabs the runner with both hands or wraps the runner with both arms. And B, unweights himself by swiveling and dropping his hips and or lower body, landing on or trapping the runner's legs at or below the knee. Now, penalty for a hip drop tackle, loss of 15 yards, automatic first down. Here's the problem. That's too vague. I showed you 3 examples where the person was behind the ball carrier, so the center of gravity shifts to the back. His legs sweep, so you go studs up, legs sweep out in almost like a cradle, like a cradle position, and you land on the back of their legs. Okay, you start at the hip, the torso, and there's all these. How do you want? There's other language to use to grab. I know that some of my friends will be mad at me for not bringing that up, but the simplicity of this has to be on the back of the legs, has to change the center of gravity from where it is to behind them, right? And the entire body has to come off the ground. Those are the 3 things. And the entire body has to come off the ground, not in a diving where if I'm diving at somebody, my belly button's still facing the ground, but I swing through and my hips are pointed up, and the backside of my body's coming down on the back of the legs. That's the rule. You take that rule, you implement it, because it's crystal clear. There's better legal language, I'm sure, to say that. It's crystal clear. It's easy to point out. I could give that to J.J. Watt in the first, and he would go, I get it every time. All these other things are not hip drop tackles. If it's close, we're not going to call it, okay? And we're going to go through a season of that and see how it works. That's not what they did. And maybe they'll fix it as we move. But right now, that's where I think a lot of the anger comes from, is it's not clear which are hip drops and not. That seems pretty obvious to me. Like, that just doesn't seem like it's very hard. Now that I just read, or I just explained the language, I think what I explained is obvious. Maybe it's not, but to me, it's obvious. The language is not obvious, because they could come from the side. There's a bunch of things that could happen that don't involve that specific criteria. So let's look at this play. You can see it right here. Feet up, sits down on the back of the legs. This is a foul. We don't want that. Instead of running through this tackle, instead of hawk rolling this tackle, techniques that this person's been taught, swings his legs through, sits down on the back of the legs. This is the exact same effect as a horse collar tackle. Call it a foul, move on. That's it. Minkah comes in with a good form tackle, by the way. This one, I had to put this one in here. This hurt me. This, like, as a red-blooded American male, this just hurt my soul when I saw this. I'm surprised this guy limped off, but it just looked so painful. So painful. It just, that's just tough. I don't know, we could talk into, is this a foul, hip drop, this and that and the other thing. I'm just telling you right now, that looks rough. Oh, man. Look at this. Whole different scenario, though. He's actually too tall. Gets up tall. We'd have to call a horse collar because he's on the back of the jersey here. But the effect is kind of the same. Man, the guy's hurting. Now watch some old Bobby Wagner tape. He's just going to. Now he could hip drop here, but he sinks properly and runs through this guy. Just runs right through him. In other words, he could swing his legs out. He could do a bunch of stuff, puts his head in front, absorbs the guy, runs right through him. Now, I know Bobby's a big, strong guy, and the running back's not as big as he is. And I know, you're seeing a lot of these from DBs who are, at a size disadvantage. Let's watch Patrick Queen here a couple weeks or a couple years ago. Now he just turns this into a shoulder roll. I'll show this from the end zone. When people say, what are the guys supposed to, when you show the Mark Andrews tape and you go, well, what are we supposed to do? It's okay. Why don't you just do this? Because this is what you've been taught anyways. You run through, right? And you shoulder roll down. You use your weight. You drop your shoulder. You hawk roll through, whatever you want to call it. And you roll the guy to the ground. You don't roll up the back of his legs. Simple. It's a great form tackle. That's a great open field chase, exact same scenario tackle. That's it. I think this is Keanu Neal from a couple years ago. What are you supposed to do? I'll just run through him. That's a great tackle. Like this, there are so many examples of things you can do. And we see a handful of plays that you haven't been taught and have turned out to be really, really effective plays, as we saw with the Steers. But you just don't do them. Now we got a guy coming across the middle. Okay, and I showed you that angle for a very specific purpose. Watch it again. He catches at the 37-yard line here, and he dives. You see the feet are not swinging through. He just goes limp. That's not a hip drop tackle. Show it from the end zone. I don't know language-wise if they're going to call it, but he's diving. He doesn't swing his feet through. He keeps his belly button towards the ground. He's going for the momentum, trying to go forward. He's trying to put the guy in the ground going forward, not a hip drop tackle. Clear. Clear. By how we've talked about this, clear. Here, could sit on the back. What does he do instead? He rolls through, makes the tackle. Again, had the opportunity to swing his feet through, break the guy's legs, didn't do it. Clear. And then, of course, I put that in. I had that already. I'm going to show that one more time so you guys see it. Oh, sorry. This is a 15-yard person. I was roughing the passer. So, I guess my point is, there's something you could have fixed, and you didn't.